Okay. So welcome to Jewish Mysticism Lessons in Tanya, chapter 13, titled The Beinoni's Complex Life. In the previous lesson, in chapter 12, we finally reached our destination, so to speak. And now we're going to spend some time at our destination. Our destination was the Beinoni, or the in-betweener. The opening 10, 20 lines of Tanya ask about 10 questions about the Beinoni. Who is the Beinoni? How is it possible to be a Beinoni? You know, if when one does righteous acts only, then they're considered a tzaddik, a righteous person. And if they do even one thing wrong, and of course the Alter Rebbe backs this up from Tanya, then they are a rasha. So how can you be a Beinoni? Right? What is the identity of this Beinoni? And in order to do, and of course we ask many other questions from lots of other sources throughout Tanakh and from the Talmud, etc. And we asked many questions about the Beinoni. It took us about 12 chapters, but last week, 2 weeks ago, before Passover, we finally explained who the Beinoni is. Albeit briefly, took a lot of background information to understand it. We finally got a handle on the Beinoni. Now that we've reached our destination, the next 10, 20, really, some can say even till the end of Tanya, is going to be spent discussing the Beinoni. Hence the title of today's lesson, The Beinoni's Complex Life, in which we're going to get a little down and dirty about the Beinoni, right? Let's talk about some circumstances. Let's, obviously, as with anything in life, there's going to be many variations of the Beinoni, right? It's not a cookie cutter thing. And hopefully by the time the class is over, we'll be a little bit closer, at least ideologically, to trying to become a Beinoni. See, this is what I love about the Tanya class. I leave all the hard work to you guys. I sit here, we discuss philosophically, ideologically. It's always so easy, right? It's always to have a conversation about good and evil philosophically. The hard work I leave to you guys. And to me, but I just got to handle this. Hard enough as it is.
It's hard coming up with these good questions we have.
What?
It's
yeah,
hard
exactly.
coming up with these good questions.
So the Beinoni's complex life. So the main point that we mentioned last week, or at least the main point that we want to remember going forward, is that the Beinoni practically doesn't do anything wrong, practically never does anything immoral, practically never slips up, so to speak. He has full control over his thought, speech, and action, all three of his garments, all three of his functions with which he interacts with the world. However, what makes him not a tzaddik is the fact that he still has a nefesh ba'amit, an animal soul. Not only does he have a nefesh ba'amit, it has a full say in the matter. And this is why the Alter Rebbe opens up today with a quote from the Talmud in Masechta Brachot, in Tractate Brachot, which is Beinoni ze v'ze shoftan. Okay, so for context, the full quote from this Talmud was brought at the beginning of Tanya, in the first chapter, in which he said, actually not the full quote, he quoted a little bit more. But basically the Talmud is obviously grappling with tzaddik, rasha, and Beinoni, and this conundrum of what is the identity of each one of them. And the Talmud over there simplifies it by saying, or at least attempts to simplify it for us by saying, a tzaddik yetzer tov shofto, right? A tzaddik, a righteous person, his holy inclination, or his good inclination, yetzer hatov, right? The power in him to do good, that's what judges him. Okay? Rasha, the evil, right? The unrighteous person, the unholy person, yetzer hara shofto. His evil inclination is what governs, is what judges his life, right? We're going to see soon, we're going to make a distinction in that, so that's why I want to clarify that. And then it finally ends off with Beinoni, however, the in-betweener, ze v'ze shoftan, both of them judge him. Okay? And this is a little bit of an elaboration as to what we mentioned last week in just a kernel. This is why the Beinoni has that constant struggle. The Beinoni has two judges. And the Alter Rebbe is medayek. How do you say medayek in English? Anybody? he specifies he
Accurately.
right, exactly. He gets down accurately and says it's specifically shoftan, that there are two judges, as opposed to saying two rulers. What do we mean? The analogy that the Alter Rebbe says that can be given for this is that of a court of law, right? So judges, based off the word judges, one can have there's a court of law, and a court of law can have multiple judges in it, right? I guess you have to pick up some papers probably from.
Pick up some papers.
Right, from the rabbi.
Paper towels.
Oh, okay.
Paper towel.
Oh, just paper towel. Okay. All right. So in a court of law, we have two. What would be where's Ashley when we need her? We have the defendant and the prosecutor, I guess, right? But what are they called as a category? The two parties come before us, and now there may be, in addition to, I don't have to do this in America, right? In America they have one judge, but they'll have no, they do, right? Like in the Supreme Court or in the district courts, they'll have more than one judge, and you have multiple judges, right? So, I guess for the purposes of our analogy, let's say that the parties here are all of the actions or all of the scenarios that come up in our lives. And who are the judges? So we know the judges already, right? There's two judges. The judges are the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara, or the good inclination and the evil inclination. Our drive for good and our drive for evil. And the language used here, the expression, is Beinoni zeh v'zeh shoftan, that both of them judge him. Not that both of them rule him, but that both of them judge him. What is the difference between a judge and a ruler? Right? A ruler would be a king, or even an owner of a boss of a company, right? He's a ruler, right? A dictator. He has the final say. He's the executive. He makes the decisions. That's it. A judge, particularly when there's more than one judge, doesn't make the decisions, right? There's a consensus of judges makes the decision. So by a Beinoni, it's when the it's similar to when the court reaches a stalemate, right? They were all worried about it before our current president got elected, right? One of the judges died, and it was going to be even, and then they need to elect a new one, right? So if you don't have an uneven amount of, if you don't have an odd amount of judges, then you're going to end up with a stalemate. Here we have an odd amount of judges, the evil inclination and the good inclination, and for the most part, it's almost always equal, right? It's always a draw. And that is the story of the Beinoni's life. So what's the obvious question?
I don't get this.
How do we sway? How do we decide? Right? We have here two parties, two judges. Each one of them submits their opinion. Each one of them submits how they feel that this person should go about his life. Right? So we have the good inclination coming and saying, well, based on the evidence and based on I think that he should go to shul and daven in the morning. And then we have the evil inclination who says, no, based on the evidence that I've received, right, and based on my professional judicial opinion, he needs to sleep in. Right? This is the court of law. The problem is that we have a stalemate. So in this regard, enter the Talmud and Kiddushin. Right? The Talmud and Kiddushin says that if it weren't for the Almighty's help, if it weren't for the help of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ilemalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ozro are the Hebrew words. That's it. He would fail every time, the Beinoni. In other words, the Beinoni needs help. He's locked in this constant stalemate. Right? Now the word stalemate is much heavier, right? A much more accurate term. It's not just, we're using an expression, he's locked in this struggle. It's not just a struggle. It's a stalemate. They're each there, and they're each powerful, and he is feeding both of them. Let's call it that, right?
Okay.
Like a muscle. If you've ever broken your arm, right, and one of your arm, right? So one arm, you break one arm, and then it's out of commission for a while. So now you're sort of uneven. If you try to do push-ups or whatever, on one side you'll be powerful. Inside of that muscle is up to par, is fit, and the other muscle isn't. right? By him, they're both constantly worked out the same way because he constantly feeds them both. In other words, the tzaddik does not feed the animal soul, right? He doesn't allow the animal soul to ever become. He doesn't exercise that muscle. Therefore, it doesn't grow. Therefore, it doesn't strengthen, etc. The Beinoni is constantly feeding both of them because they do both exist there. Not only do they exist there, but he values both opinions.
He's on the fence.
He's on the fence. He's on the fence, smack in the middle, and he's really not sure which direction to go. Again, there's no ruler here. There will be a ruler at the end of each, or a ruling. There will be a ruling at the end of each struggle, but each time the struggle is there anew. Right? So even if, let's say, somehow by some miraculous form he gets himself out of bed and he goes to Minyan in the morning and he, right? When it comes time for lunch and he has the opportunity to listen to something, some sort of Torah thought during lunch, or to just, read up on the latest news, see what Mark Zuckerberg had to say in his testimony, right?
Yeah.
So, again, it's a stalemate again, and the whole story starts all over again. And this is why the Talmud says that
It sounds like us, but we are not even Beinoni. We are in Russia.
So the struggle is real, right? This we know already from last week. But now the question is, so how is there a ruling? How do they ever reach a ruling if they're at a stalemate? So the Talmud in Kiddushin is telling us that Hashem, in His ultimate kindness, tells the Beinoni, if you manage to get to a stalemate, which is a Herculean effort in and of itself, right? I don't know about you guys, but by me, many times it doesn't even make it to there, right? There's only one judge. There's only one opinion to follow, so we follow that opinion, right? I won't say which one. It's not a mitzvah to say Lashon Hara about yourself.
It's not.
What?
No.
What?
It's not.
Right. Just as it's not a mitzvah to say Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara means that speak derogatorily, in a derogatory fashion about someone else, right? So just as not lying, even the truth.
No, they like the evil eye.
Evil eye, yeah. That's ayin hara you're talking about. Ayin hara means the evil eye. Lashon hara means the evil tongue. So to speak negatively about someone else. So that's a mitzvah, and then there's also included in that is speaking negatively about oneself. Anyways, but back to the topic at hand. So Hashem says, okay, if you manage to make it to a stalemate where there's two judges, they both have opinions, and they're now equal, and you're not sure which direction to go, I'll come. I'll be the third judge, right? And you'll make it through. And the Beinoni does, right? This is always the tricky part to wrap our brains around mentally. That the Beinoni, even though he has this struggle inside of him very, very strong, every single time he wins. If he fails once, then he's a Rasha. Right? Because if he fails once, that means in that moment, he is completely...
He lost his title.
Right? He lost his title, like you said, exactly. He merged. We spoke about the fluctuation between the titles, right? Fluctuation between the levels of being a Rasha at some point, or a Rasha V'Tovlo, right? Rasha V'Rado, Rasha Beinoni, then a Tzaddik V'Tovlo, Tzaddik V'Rado, Tzaddik Gamur, a complete Tzaddik, an incomplete Tzaddik, right? All these different stages. Okay? Now, here's the question. Last week, we never mentioned this, or 2 weeks ago. In chapter 12, we never spoke about this whole godly intervention and divine assistance, and he needs a third judge. We never spoke about it. Almost as if in chapter 12, the Alter Rebbe was talking about one type of Beinoni, and in chapter 13, he's talking about another type of Beinoni. What's the difference? Anybody remember one other element that we spoke about from the Beinoni from last time? That Beinoni has extra power, not from Hashem, but from somewhere else. Anybody remember? From where? From one moment in his day.
Prayer.
Very good. Exactly. During prayer, or we mentioned Kriyat Shema, when he reads Shema, there are specific times when he maybe fluctuates even up to being a tzaddik for a moment. In other words, in that moment, the Nefesh HaBa'amit, the evil inclination, or the animal soul has absolutely no say in his life. And from that moment of intense devotion to Hashem, and I do nothing with my life other than God, and everything I eat, everything I drink, and everything I do in my life is with a godly purpose, from that intense love for Hashem, he can have this residue effect, or a carryover effect to the rest of his life. Right? To the rest of his day.
One question.
1 second. Sure. And that was the Beinoni from last week. The Beinoni from this week is talking about the Beinoni in his natural state. Let's say the Beinoni, but he doesn't have that residue effect. Maybe his davening this morning didn't include as much meditation as it should have. Right? Maybe it didn't include as much prolonged thinking about God imbued in his prayer. Maybe it was, a davening like, lip surface. He went through the words. So then where does he get the power? Right? In other words, what the Alter Rebbe is trying to point out to us is that when you're at a stalemate and you have the Nefesh HaBahamit and the Nefesh Elokit, the godly soul and the animal soul, and they're at each other's necks, and the struggle is real, something has to tip them. Either you have to have that extra power that you got from your davening, from a moment of extreme holiness or a moment of extreme devotion to God, or you have to have divine assistance. Hashem has to simply have mercy on you and allow you to
choose the right way.
To choose, or assist you to choose the right way, push you in the right direction. Yes, Rob.
Okay. A couple of lessons ago, we talked about the fact that the animal soul really wants us to do
the right
what
thing.
it expects.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
It just wants to provide the challenge.
Okay. The whole concept of the judges here. Okay. Doesn't the animal soul isn't going to judge us as if we're doing the good things? Isn't it going to judge in our favor? So then you would have no.
No, because then it wouldn't be doing its job. The whole point is that it was given a job here in this world. We said the only time the game is up, the only time the Nefesh HaBahamit will tell you that is either if you reach the stage of a tzaddik gamur, of a complete tzaddik, and you actually manage to transform your animal soul to good, to desire God. That's one way.
Okay.
Since I think most of us in this room don't stand a chance in that regard, I'll speak for myself. I don't stand a chance in that regard. So therefore, I'll say the time that we'll realize this is when Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, it says that the Nefesh HaBahamit, the animal soul, will come to us and say, why did you... Actually, it says about evil inclination. Will come to us, which are very similar, and they're definitely allies. But will come to us and say, why did you listen to me? Remember that time that I told you to sleep in and not go to minyan in the morning? Why did you listen to me? Right? Because that's when its true purpose will be revealed. I should mention that for those of you that were here at the Mashiach Seudah, at the Mashiach meal, we spoke about this at length, that is what Mashiach is, right? One of the main verses that it says about Mashiach is that Bilah HaMavet LaNetzach. It says that death will be eradicated from the world. Starts with a yud. I forgot the rest of the verse. It's either the beginning or the end. I forget the rest of the words. But basically, that evil will be eradicated from the world, and death will depart from the world. And death will depart forever. I forget the exact words. In other words, what is Mashiach? Mashiach is all of these things. This klipa, these things that seem to contradict God, cease to exist, or now that we have a little bit of a deeper understanding of Tanya, they reveal their true purpose as to what they really are. Okay, so now why does he need these additional things? Why does he need these additional things? Because as the Alter Rebbe mentioned last week in Tanya, why does he need this by additional things? I mean, this assistance from God or this carryover from prayer. The Beinoni. Yeah. From now on, if I say he, basically for the rest of the Tanya, the book of Tanya, we're talking about the Beinoni for the most part. Why does the Beinoni need this extra assistance? Because the Alter Rebbe mentioned last week that Haki Hamoach Shalit Ala Lev V'Todato, that the mind rules over the heart naturally. There is a natural ability for the mind to rule over the heart. The problem is that in order for the mind to rule over the heart, the mind has to be on the right track. Right? We all know, it's very nice to say that the mind rules over the heart, the mind doesn't rule over the heart, but as human beings, we're much more complex than that. Sometimes our heart can channel upwards and try to dictate our mind as to where it should go. Or in simpler words, the part of us that's in the Chalal Asmali, in the left chamber, right, the negative energies that we have within us, in other words, our animal soul, can sometimes take over our mind and place negative thoughts in our mind. By negative, I don't mean about ourselves. By negative, I mean to do the wrong thing, to be immoral, to do something against what Hashem wants. Everybody with me? In that case, if the mind rules over the heart, you're in bad luck. You're in bad shape, right? So really, we need a two-step process. We need that our minds should be on the right page, for starters. Right? We need that we should have the right thoughts. We need that we should have the right desires. We should want to do the right thing. Then the next step is, because we're all familiar with this, right? Many times we have, right, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Right? Many times we want to do the right thing, but there's this distance between our mind and our actions. That's where the Alter Rebbe says, don't worry, if you work hard enough, naturally the mind overpowers the body. The mind can control the emotions. But you want to make sure, for starters, that your mind is on the right page. In that regard, you need help. Either you need that carryover of it. Why? What's the help that you need? And now it begins to make much more sense. What's the help that we need? When the help is, when the assistance is the carryover of that feeling, of that fervor from davening, it's that concentration. If meditation during prayer brings one thing, it should bring a concentration, or a focus, let's call it, a focus on the right thing, on doing the right thing. And then our mind is in the right place. Once our mind is in the right place, then you can use your mind to control your heart. Great. If you don't have that carryover from prayer, which is what we've been tackling today, so then you need a little bit of godly intervention, a little bit of divine assistance. What? For Hashem to tell you that I will help you in your mind to make sure that the governing thought in your mind, by being the third judge and outnumbering 2-1, will make sure that the ruling goes as per the good inclination, right? The holy soul, the godly soul, and then you'll use your natural ability to have your mind have your mind control your emotions. I want to point out that this also answers a question which many of you may have been thinking about, which is sort of, I guess, call it freedom of choice. I don't want to get too philosophical, right? But let's call it just in terms of credit, right? Why would we even say that the Beinoni gets the credit if all he did was get you to... So let's say he gets the credit for making the struggle equal, which is huge in and of itself, giving them both equal power. Not that like by many people, that the nefesh v'hamit is just there, and the animal soul is the governing force by default, right? So I guess he would get credit for that. But if Hashem is injecting divine assistance, if Hashem is the one helping out, why does he get credit for it? But now we understand that all Hashem is doing is helping to make sure that his mind is in the right place. We all know that a tremendous part of the struggle is the connection between the mind and the emotions, right? Making sure that there's no disconnect between what our mind wants and what actually happens as a result of our emotions. Everybody with me? All right. Section 2. For those of you that follow me on Facebook, this was the teaser for this section here.
You don't do Messenger?
What was that?
You do Messenger or any of that stuff?
Sure.
I'm not on Facebook, so I just wonder.
Familiar. In the second section here, which is on page, what's that?
Even if the entire world calls you a tzaddik, you yourself like a rock.
In section 2, the Alter Rebbe begins to grapple with self-image. Okay, section 2, if you recall correctly, is a question that was really addressed, or not addressed, was really brought to the fore in the first chapter of Tanya. Right? When we asked a simple question, we asked a simple question. The first words of Tanya are Tanya besof per gimel nida. We have learned at the end of chapter 3 of tractate Nida, which is a tractate of the Talmud. We learned that mashbi'in oto, that before a soul comes down here from above, the angels make the soul swear. You should be a tzaddik, and you should not be a rasha. And then it continues, va'afilu kol ha'olam kulo, and even if the entire world, omrim lecha tzaddikata, the whole world looks at you and says you're a tzaddik, not like the Israelis like to say it. Tzadikata. No, not like that. That doesn't count. Even if people really look at you and they say, wow, oh my gosh, sir, you're such an amazing person. I can't believe it. You're really such a holy person. You're a tzaddik. But for real, not you pass me the water, so you're a tzaddik. So even if the entire world tells you a tzaddik, the Talmud in Tractate Nida tells you no. You view yourself as a rasha. You view yourself as a wicked person. You view yourself as someone who's completely dictated by their animal soul. And the questions that Tanya asks on that immediately, besides for the fact that there's a clear Mishnah which says that you should not view yourself as a Rasha, you should never view yourself as a in a negative light like that. Besides for that, Tanya has a sort of catch-22. If I choose to view myself, I understand why you're telling me not to view myself as a tzaddik. Because if I view myself as a tzaddik, what happens? I become overconfident.
You lower your standards.
Complacent.
You lower your guard, not your standards, right? You become I don't know if complacent, right? But let's say you're a tzaddik and you're not complacent. You continue, right? But your animal soul is there, and it's fighting hard. And all it was waiting for was for you to think, oh great, I've reached the level of a tzaddik, I can lower my guard down, and then there it is again. Right? We've all been there.
But if it's transformed, what's the matter if you're...
No, we're not talking about somebody who's a tzaddik.
Oh.
We're talking about somebody who's not a tzaddik.
Who's been told that he's a tzaddik.
Oh.
Somebody the world is telling him as a tzaddik. He knows, let's say, that he's at a Beinoni, right? This is why it's such a great analogy for the Beinoni, not analogy, why it's such a great perspective on the Beinoni. Because he's in the middle. He's not a tzaddik, he's not a Rasha. Yet he's being told, don't look at yourself like a tzaddik, no matter what status you're at. And by the way, even the tzaddik, remember the incomplete tzaddik still has that nefesh ma'amid, and it could flare up. And even the complete tzaddik should never fully become complacent, because you can always fluctuate down. Right? Just like you can fluctuate up, you can fluctuate down. For a different time. So why shouldn't you view yourself as a tzaddik? Why shouldn't I go around? We're not talking about gaiva. We're not talking about walking around telling everybody you're a tzaddik. That's a whole different issue, right? No, even thinking you're a tzaddik. Why shouldn't I walk around the whole day thinking that I'm the biggest tzaddik that ever hit planet Earth? Why? Because if I do, what does that mean? It means I believe that I'm in complete mastery over my emotions, over my actions, over my evil inclination. As a result, like you said, you'll let your guard down. You'll be overconfident, and then
You don't strive higher.
one day you'll fall.
There's no room for holy thoughts if you're having those thoughts. There's no room.
Right. So I guess the question, right? What you're referring to is that if you're so busy thinking about yourself, right? There's a famous Gemara that says that God tells us not to be offended, but that if we're egotistical, right? If we're so full of ourselves, there's no space, right? It's a famous Gemara in Sukkah. It states a very simple fact. It says a cup, right, or any vessel, if it's full, it can't receive. If it's empty, then it can receive. So too with God. If we're so full of ourselves, there's no space for God. God says, "Ein ani v'hu yicholim ladur sham," right? Ladur ba. You and I, or me and you, cannot reside in the same space. There's no space. There's only space for one. Right? But if you nullify yourself and you make space to allow God in, right? We spoke about this at length over Passover, the difference between chametz and matzah, making space for God, not making space for God, right? So I think that's what you were talking about, right? That these thoughts are predominating in your head. But let's say not even that, right? Just honestly. You have to be able to assess yourself honestly. If a person doesn't actually assess themselves and realize where they're holding, or they fool themselves the way they're holding, then they'll never be able to work on themselves. So back to where we were. We had this catch-22 that Tanya was asking. If you look at yourself as a tzaddik, you become overconfident, you'll let your guard down. So let me look at myself as a Rasha. Right? Like the Tractate Nida, the Talmud and Tractate Nida is actually telling me to do. But then I have a different issue.
Give up.
If I look at myself as a Rasha, I'll give up. It'll lead to self-doubt, and eventually might end up leading to depression, which definitely won't get us anywhere.
Even worse, you might end up reveling in it.
Yeah, whatever. I don't think we need to belabor the point here. Depression is a negative thing for many reasons, not just because you end up dwelling in it, not just because you end up committing suicide, not because you'll be lethargic, for lots of reasons, right? So why would the Talmud advise us to look at ourselves like a Rasha? So the key lies in, again, being medayek, in getting accurate here, in realizing the exact language that's used here. It doesn't say that he should view himself as a Rasha. It says he should view himself like a Rasha. What does like a Rasha mean? So obviously it's not an actual Rasha. You shouldn't view yourself as an actual Rasha, right? The Beinoni is like a Rasha. Right? Can anybody think of ways that the Beinoni is very similar to a Rasha? What's one?
That he listened to his evil inclination, may.
That he allows space for his evil inclination. Right? Okay, so that's on an inward level. Right? On an outer level as well, we're in the middle of number 2 here. Right? On an outwardly level too, even in his actions, we said the Beinoni, right? If it weren't for Hashem's help or the extra support that he gets from prayer, he would actually do something negative. So the Beinoni is very similar to a Rasha. I mean, with a huge difference, right? But he's like a Rasha. Says the tractate, the Talmud in Nida, a person should always, even if the entire world calls you a tzaddik, you should view yourself as a Rasha. I'm sorry, like a Rasha. You should view yourself like a Rasha. In other words, you should view yourself as a Beinoni who is very close to being a Rasha, but yet not as an actual Rasha. And this self-image, this way that we look at ourselves is paramount, is key, is very, very important to understanding how we go about life. Why? Because of that catch-22 that we mentioned. Let's see the last 2 points in number 2, right? You should not see yourself as a Rasha. Why? Because then you'll become depressed and give up. You should not see yourself as a tzaddik, or you'll become overconfident and non-vigilant. We need you to stay in this situation where you don't get too overconfident, you don't become too depressed. View yourself as a Beinoni. The Beinoni is this magical, struggling individual. And because if a person constantly realizes that he's still in the middle of the struggle,
He will try harder.
he'll always be on his toes. Right?
I like the temporary fix.
Temporary fix. We're getting there. We're getting there. We are getting there. I want to read inside a little bit more about this self-image thing, because I think it's very, very important. On page 157, the 3rd paragraph. If a Beinoni would look at himself as a tzaddik, he would imagine that his battle with evil is over. As you said, Pam. Right? So he might lower his guard and relax to some extent. Therefore, the sages stressed that a Beinoni is essentially like a Rasha. Right?
Where are you reading?
And I'm on page 157.
2nd paragraph.
In other words, they don't call the Beinoni. They could have said, don't view yourself as a tzaddik, view yourself as a Beinoni. What would be wrong with that? No, the point was, view yourself as this Beinoni who is so similar to a Rasha, who is like a Rasha, in whom the Yetzer Hara is as strong as ever in the heart. With such strong negative energy lurking below the surface, it would be a grave error for the Beinoni to relax his vital for even a moment. Skip the words of Tanya for a moment. The animal soul is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Even if all its desires are kosher, the fact that it drives you to eat and enjoy other pleasures daily gives it strength. The fact that it says, I want you to eat for the pleasure of eating. Not an avera, right? Not a prohibition, not prohibited by the Torah. But by giving into that will and allowing it to be the dictating force in your life, you're exercising that muscle. So in all likelihood, the Beinoni's impression that he is a tzaddik who has eliminated the evil from his heart couldn't be further from the truth. Not only has he failed to eliminate his evil, but over time it has grown even stronger. The more he thinks of himself as a tzaddik, and he's not sinning, right? We're not talking. He's not transgressing here. Otherwise, then he would be a Rasha, right? But he's exercising a muscle that will lead him down that path. If he looks at himself as a tzaddik. If he looks at himself as like a Rasha, in other words, if he looks at himself as this Beinoni that's so similar to a Rasha that he never lets his guard, then what happens? Comes the nefesh ha'amid, the animal. It comes because in the morning it's time to eat breakfast. The animal soul says, "You should, yes, sure, eat breakfast. Enjoy breakfast. Breakfast can be enjoyable. You're eating for the sake of eating." And he says to himself, "I'm like a tzaddik. I don't need to worry about it. He wants me to eat. I'll eat. What's wrong with eating?"
He's
Right?
also listening to the wrong person.
Very good, exactly. What's wrong with doing that is not necessarily even the act itself, even though we've discussed that there are issues with that as well. But what's wrong with doing that, the worst part about this is that you've let your guard down and you're allowing it to continue to grow in your life. You're allowing it to continue to be a force in your life. Never forget that when we were in yeshiva, this is the Chabad yeshiva way, by the way. This is not, in other yeshivas, this is not common at all. There's a concept that they stress to the boys called Kabbalat Ol. In English, it would mean acceptance of the yoke. Or, in plainer English, blind obedience. They wanted blind obedience from us to what it is that's expected from us. Okay, so obviously study Torah, do mitzvahs, davening, etc., right? But there was this stress. It was like, in the yeshiva that I went to, it was way worse to come 5 minutes late to class, 5 minutes or 2 minutes late to class, than it was to not show up. If you didn't show up and you came downstairs, you said, I'm sorry, I wasn't feeling well, I had the sniffles, I was very tired, whatever. That's one thing. We'll deal with it. Right? But where does it come from to come 2 or 3 minutes late?
Discipline.
Lack of discipline. And they wanted to teach us, if there's one thing that's important in Chassidus, it's discipline. It's why? Because that's exercising a positive muscle. Right? It's reminding yourself that I need to make sure that who is in control here. Right? Is the fact that you come 3 minutes late to learn Chassidus in the morning, when it's an hour and a half class, and then you're going to have a break for 15 minutes before davening, and you came 2-3 minutes late, I'll stay for 15 minutes, I'll give up my whole break afterwards to continue learning. It doesn't help me. It doesn't help me. Why? Because you already lost the battle, not the war, but you lost the battle by coming those 2-3 minutes late. Why? Because you're exercising a muscle that's unhealthy for you. And when we were in yeshiva, we fought bloody murder against this. What's wrong with you? I was here, I was right? And how much, right? I mean, everybody in this room is adults, Baruch Hashem, right? And we all understand the value of that, right? Now, I wish I had listened more to them and I would actually have more discipline in my life, right? If I would have a little bit more discipline in my life, I would get a lot more done. I would, because when you have discipline in your life, then you can have a proper schedule and then you can get things done. And then when you want to do the wrong thing or you want to be more lazy, whatever, then you're more on top of it. Why? Because you're exercising a muscle called discipline. Try it out. Do it again. Do it again. You'll get used to it. Right?
So we should all be on time here.
You see, I still haven't learned. All right, section 3. So in section 3, he's going to talk about the fact that sometimes you have a Beinoni who's not worried about all this. You can have a Beinoni who spends his entire life or his entire day occupied with Torah and mitzvahs. He makes himself busy. Pam's fix, right? Pam says, your mind was busy with the wrong thing. Keep your mind busy with the right thing, right? This is a famous parsha thought on which parsha would it be? Vayeshev. When is Joseph sold by his brothers? I think of Vayeshev. Either way, whichever parsha it is, right? So the verse states, "V'habor rik ein bo mayim." Right? It says that the pit is empty. There's no water inside. Anybody ever heard this drash on the parsha?
Yeah.
What does Rashi say right away? From the fact that right, this is classic Talmud. From the fact that it says in the beginning of the verse that the pit is empty, don't I know that there's no water in it? Right? So what's it teaching me? That the pit is empty and there's no water. Right? Rashi explains that the moment that the pit is empty, in one reality there's no water, but what is there? There are snakes and scorpions. And the famous, right? This is what Rashi says. The famous drash on this, the famous Torah thought on this, is that the same is true of our minds, right? Haborik, the pit is empty, but your issue is she'ein bo mayim, that there's no Torah in there. If there was Torah in there, there wouldn't be space for anything else. The moment that there's no Torah in there, what happens? The chashim ba'akrafim, then you get snakes and scorpions, all sorts of negative influences in your mind, right? If you're not thinking about Torah, your mind wanders to other places. Right? Many people say it's a great fix for trying. Right? If you think about it, if your mind is wandering, let's say, especially to immoral thoughts or to all sorts of fantasies and imaginations, places that your imagination can take you that are negative, that are completely from klipa, completely from negative energies, you think about it, that's a terrible time to be thinking Torah. Right? Why? Because my mind is occupied with such shtuyot, right? With such foolishness, such folly, and now I'm going to start thinking Torah. But no, the truth is that Torah can actually schlep you out of that. When you go to the extreme, right, and right in Chabad circles, many people will choose to take out their phone or their whatever, or a picture they have in their wallet, and look at a picture of the Rebbe. Right? When you go to the extreme of holiness, you look at a tzaddik, or you think Torah, so then it schleps you out of it, and you go all the way to the other direction, and then you have that extra power, right? Right? So this could be a good Beinoni, and to be honest, why shouldn't he be able to look at himself as a tzaddik? He's busy with Torah all day. What's he worried about? What's going to happen? Why shouldn't he be able to? What's he worried? How's he going to slip up? Right? So to this, Tanya explains right away that this is only a hack. It's cute. For now you're managing. For now you got it. Right now you're studying Torah and you're busy with the Torah the whole time. Right? But it's a temporary fix. It's an added on. It's something added. It's not. You didn't. Right? At the beginning of Tanya we spoke at the long short way, the short long way. You found the short long way. It's short because right now you're learning Torah. Right now the evil inclination has no say. Right now anything negative is right. So even in those instances where we're talking about negative thoughts that come into our mind, right, then your mind is busy with other things and you want to think Torah to schlep it out, it can be a temporary fix. Schlep you out. But you got to attack it at the root of the issue. You can't convince yourself that therefore I'm invincible. Because you're still at the level of a Beinoni. You're still struggling. And now, so just to clarify, and I actually I made a mental note before class to read this inside. Okay, so now the Alter Rebbe introduces one more type of Beinoni. That is, you can have a Beinoni who sometimes almost becomes like a tzaddik for a moment, right? And we spoke about it already last week, 2 weeks ago, during prayer. Right? If a person meditates for long enough, we'll talk in just a moment. We'll actually give a moment soon to talk about exactly what meditation is and how meditation works. Right? Proper meditation during davening that actually gives birth to a proper love of God can also bring you to a very high state. That's another type of Beinoni. So to summarize, I'd like to turn to page 160.
That would be an incomplete Beinoni.
Complete, incomplete. It wouldn't even be an incomplete tzaddik. It would be a Beinoni who, for a moment, sort of fluctuates into this level of tzaddik for a moment. This is going to be important in future lessons. That's why he's mentioning it now, in future chapters. But let's turn to page 160 because I don't feel like I did justice to our last one, but I want to summarize them all. Right. So to summarize, between right, from the beginning of the chapter, all one at a time. To sum up, we have now witnessed the Beinoni in 4 different settings. Number 1. Pan, go ahead.
Not immersed in Torah or prayer, he experiences urges from the animal soul.
Hold on. This was the title of section 1, the Beinoni's default level. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
And only succeeds in deflecting them through God's assistance of extra light shining in his soul. The deep core of the animal soul is unaffected.
This does nothing to the animal soul. You had a stalemate, God came, was the third judge, that's it, we're done, we're good. Right? That's the first level of a Beinoni. And that is what we call the default level of Beinoni. When the Beinoni has nothing else added on top, there's no extra prayer, there's no Kriyat Shema, there's no Torah study all day. He's at his default level. He's going to need that assistance from God, and then he'll be able to overcome it. Michael, you want to do number 2 for us?
Sure. For a period.
The second type of Beinoni. Yeah.
For a period after meditative prayer, he experiences urges from the animal soul and only succeeds in deflecting them through the clarity of mind that remains after prayer. This enables him to make use of the principle, the brain rules over the heart. The deep core of animal soul is unaffected. Again, the deep core of the animal soul unaffected. Why? Because the animal soul doesn't care. It's an added thing that you have on you, right? It's from prayer, and this is the one we mentioned 2 weeks ago, and we recapped on it today, right? So this is another level. This is not at its default state. He's done something to help himself, right? He's had a proper davening, a proper prayer with meditation. And that's the next topic of conversation as soon as we finish summarizing these 4 to talk about what meditation is, right? And he's carrying that over and then just using the natural instinct of the brain rules over the heart. Okay, Catherine, you want to read for us number 3? So this is the third type of Beinoni.
Okay. During devotional Torah study, it is possible that he will not experience urge from the animal soul at all. If he does, he can succeed in deflecting them through the clarity of mind which has come from his Torah study, enabling him to make use of the principle, The brain rules over the heart. The deep core of the animal soul is unaffected.
So here what's going on is, and this is why we call it a temporary fix. He's found another way, right? The goal here is to make sure that your mind, to get yourself to a state where your mind can rule over naturally over your heart. So the goal here is to make sure your mind is in the right place. In the first one, Hashem was helping you with that. In the second one, prayer, the leftover feeling from prayer, that devotion to God, that connects, the relationship with God from prayer is carrying over, and that's what's helping you do it. In this third stage, he's doing it through intense Torah study. His current situation is that he's engrossed in Torah study. His mind is clear. His mind is thinking godly thoughts. So he's busy with that. Right? Now, the common denominator between these three levels is that in all of them he's a real Beinoni. He will never call him like a tzaddik. He has stayed at the level of Beinoni. Why? Because what is the last line of each of them? The deep core of the animal soul remains unaffected. The animal soul is dear, keteva b'todato, as it was born. Full of fire to drive him to do evil. Right? But now, number 4, Elise.
During focused meditative prayer, he may not...
So hold on. What's the difference between number 4 and number 1? Anybody? Sorry, and number 2? Between number 4 and number 2?
After prayer.
Exactly. Number two is that residue feeling, that carryover feeling from prayer. Number 4 now we're talking about a Beinoni during davening. Not just during davening, but he's davening like a Beinoni should be davening. Right? He's thinking about God and how great God is, and meditation, as we're going to talk about in a moment. Go ahead.
Okay. He may not experience urges from the animal soul. Even the deep core of the animal soul may partially be affected by his intense love of God.
Sound familiar at all? What does it sound like?
Like a tzaddik.
Very good. In this moment, he fluctuates a little bit up to the level of a tzaddik for a moment. Okay? Really, this is parenthetic, right? This is really like a tangent. I just want to give you guys a sneak peek of a future lesson. There is a concept during this moment, and this is actually a very high level of a Beinoni, that a person can draw down a neshama of a tzaddik. In other words, not of a person, a tzaddik. A tzaddik level neshama, and which can come, this is a very Kabbalistic concept called bibchinat ibur. It will be as if he's pregnant, as if he's carrying another neshama together with his neshama. I know, right? I said it's a tangent, we're not going down this path. I just want to give you a teaser to that this is how high this level can get through proper meditation of prayer. I guess what I'm also trying to tell you is how valuable it is and how important it is to realize the benefits of prayer.
And the person know it?
And think about during davening.
No.
Presumably the person would know it. Yeah, if he's so fiery and focused on God, he might not know that this is because of the neshama of a tzaddik, but that's, and therefore he can reach the level, during this moment, he could technically reach the level of a tzaddik gamur, of a complete tzaddik. Okay? Whatever, we won't talk about the crash that comes afterwards. Right? Everything. Right? What happens when you smoke, right? And there's a crash afterward, crash landing after davening. Alright. And there's tips for that, by the way. That's later in Tanya. Fine. So at least finish off for us. At this 4th level,
at this 4th level, the Beinoni does seem to resemble the Sadiq. Why then did the Tanya insist that the Beinoni is always like a Russian?
Why? To this, the next couple lines in Tanya explain that the reason for that is because still it's not the only ruler. To be a tzaddik, your nefesh halukit, your godly soul has to be the only ruler in your life. Not the winning side, because the very fact that you're going to call it the winning side means that there's another side and that it's also being taken into account. You're just not listening to it in this moment.
You don't have the conflict.
Correct. A tzaddik does not have the conflict. In fact, Tanya talked about the conflict of a tzaddik. The conflict of a tzaddik is in levels of holiness. Climbing in levels of holiness, that's his avodah, that's his work, that's his business. That's what he does for a living. All right, meditation. So let's start with the practice of it, right? So practically, what is meditation? Meditation means, meditation in Judaism, or what we call in Hebrew, hitbonenut, right? The word hitbonenut, you'll notice, comes from the root word of bina, right? Bina being the second of the 10 attributes, right? The first one was chachma, that flash. Everybody remember this when we went through all the 10 of them? that flash of wisdom, and Bina being the fleshing out of it. Right? So Bina is when a person thinks for a long time, very elaborately, about one particular topic. In English we would call this meditation. Right? So, look, I don't know a lot about secular meditation, and I'm going to call it secular, but let's say other religious meditations or yoga meditations or these other, right? I am familiar with the concept that there is something called a mantra. I won't be able to give you a comparative study on them, but I will try to clarify what meditation means in terms of Yiddishkeit.
We didn't hire you for that.
Right, exactly. You didn't hire me for my experiential knowledge of Buddhism or something, right? Okay, good. So, what? You did?
Mantra is just, many years.
Oh, okay. I thought you hired me for that reason. Yeah, go ahead.
No, but the mantra is just something you say over and over and over. It's a short.
Right, exactly. So the reason I mentioned the mantra, right? So the reason I mentioned the mantra is because I believe that the closest thing to a mantra in Judaism would be the words of davening, right? The words of davening, and for those of you that are, this is where those of you that come to the prayer class will be a little bit ahead of the game. The words of davening are designed in a way that they are specific, but at the same time, while they're specific, they leave a lot of space for creativity or for, I don't know if creativity is the right word, for elaboration. And meditation in Judaism means that during davening, I take a moment, I say a couple words in prayer, and then I pause. And I start to think about how this affects, right? We talk about how great God is during prayer, right? We begin to think about God. And the one focus of our minds is God. So for starters, we're already in good shape because our mind is occupied, is busy with thinking about God. But more important than that, what's the goal here? The goal here is to think so much about how great God is that we're going to fall into that system that we spoke about at the beginning of Tanya. Right? At the beginning of Tanya, when we were talking about our spiritual makeup, the design of our intellectual and emotive and right the whole system, we spoke about how it starts in Chabad. Everything starts in your mind. First, it's a kernel of an idea. Then it fleshes out. Then there's that connection level, right? Everybody remember discussing that knowledge? There's that connection level that connects to the emotions. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, kindness, right? Severity, all the different stages, right? And we spoke about how it starts in the thought, right? You think about it. You think about it enough, and emotion is born out of it, right? Depending on what you're thinking about, right? That's what type of emotion will be born. If you're thinking about how great something is, let's talk about the one we're more familiar with. If we let somebody who irks us dominate our minds, I can't stand him. We think for so long, we think about how much we hate that person. What happens? What's born out of it? Hatred. Right? If we think for long enough in our minds about what's wrong with that person, eventually you'll develop hatred for that person. The opposite is true though too. And you can do this with anything. Take any item, something you're completely not familiar with, a consumer item. This is why infomercials exist, right? And in your mind, think about qualities of that item. What will be born from that? A love or a desire for that item. Because the more you think about how good it is, and you're not thinking about the negative traits of it, the more you'll feed into that. That's the emotions that are born as a result of it. So during davening, what we're looking for is to develop an emotion for God. We're looking to develop the hardest emotion that could possibly be. Right? To me, to develop an emotion of love for anybody in this room, pretty easy. Okay? If you piss me off, it'll be a little harder. Right? But I'll still be able to do it. Much harder than that is to develop an emotion of love for something we can't see and we can't hear, as much as it affects our lives. So davening is an attempt, and hopefully an even slight experience of that, having that relationship with God. You have your issues with God. Let it out. Let it out during davening. Right? What do you do if you have an issue with your spouse? Talk it out. Right? And eventually, because you keep it inside you, and then it'll just sit. Right? And eventually, what we're looking for is to think about God and how great He is, how much He affects our lives, the kindness that He shows us. This starts with practical things. The fact that I have such a beautiful life, the fact that I have a beautiful wife, and I'm married, and I have a lovely family, and children, and then he supports me, whatever, right? Thinking about positive things in our lives. I know we all have negative things in our lives. Trust me, right? And we could feed into those thoughts, but during davening is an exercise in mind over heart, right? The more we meditate on these things, we linger on these things, the more it ceases to become practical anymore. Now it's beyond practical. God is kind. God is great. Look how great God is. And the more we think about God and how great He is and how much He's all-encompassing in the world. Now He's found in everything. The more we think about this, and by the way, help with thinking about these things during davening is learning about them before davening. Right? That's what Chassidus is, by the way. Right? Thinking about the great, philosophizing about the greatness of God, because the more we think about it, the more we'll have food for thought to use during davening. And the goal of it all is what? To give birth to an emotion of love. If we can develop an emotion of love, right? The crescendo of it all is when we get to Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Baruch Shem K'vod Malchuto L'olam Va'ed. And what's the next word? Ve'ahavta. What does ve'ahavta mean?
And you should love.
And you should love Him. Ve'ahavta v'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha. Right? You should love God with all of your heart and all your might. That verse, by the way, is packed with meaning. One step is to love God with all your heart, for starters, right? It's hard. It's hard to focus your entire heart on something. The next step is b'chol ma'odach, with all your might. Then there's like Talmudic discussions about it, that it's b'shnei yitzarecha, with both of your inclinations, right? The level of a tzaddik, try to get your even inclination on board. These are all talking about this mitzvah, this very difficult mitzvah, which is loving God. It's one of the mitzvahs, by the way, that one of the 7 mitzvahs that we're commanded to do at every moment. Right? There's a mitzvah to love every Jew. That's at every moment. There's a mitzvah to believe in God. It's at every moment. Right? There's a mitzvah not to have any false gods. Right? At every moment. One of the mitzvahs, two of the mitzvahs are to love God and to fear God. How's that going to happen if you don't work on it? Right? You're not going to learn to love someone on the street if you didn't even ask her for a number, right? Start off talking to her. Date her. Talk to her. Get to know her. Right? It's time to date God. Right? That's what davening is. Talking to God, having that meditational, with the idea of giving birth to a love. One second. So what I wanted to point out here was the power of meditation. That's how we got to this whole thing, right? The power of meditation is so strong because there's a Kabbalistic secret behind it. Once upon a time I was going to print out the Kabbalistic chart, right? The Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. The way the 10 attributes are set up is that there's 3 on the right, 3 on the left, and 4 in the middle. The 3 on the right are what's called the right side is Chachan. Chachma, Chesed, Netzach. Okay? In translated to English or into emotions or attributes that we have, they are Chachma is wisdom, that first flash of intellectualism. Chesed is kindness or giving or right, the side of loving kindness. And Netzach is perseverance or keeping it on.
Effort.
Well?
Effort.
Okay. More to the point of what we're talking on the left side, the middle, Gvura is the first one. I'm sorry. It starts off with Bina is the first one on the left side. Right? We have Chachma, Bina, Dat. Bina is the first one on the left side. And Bina is what?
Understanding.
What do Bina is understanding. But what did we just say earlier? Bina is the same root word as Hitbonenut, or the word for meditation. Bina is that attribute which gives us that ability to meditate, to think about something for a prolonged period of time. And Bina leads into which one? What's the second one on the left side? You said it before. Gevura. It belongs to a side that's full of this strength, this power. And it too has in it power. And that's why meditation is so important during davening. That's just the Kabbalistics behind it. I know it's not practical, whatever, right? We spoke of the practical side of meditation. But on a Kabbalistic sense, the reason why Bina is so powerful is because it belongs to the left side, which is much more about power, much more about strength. That meditation has the power to overpower our lives and then even bring us to the level of a tzaddik and draw down this other neshama as a level of pregnancy, etc. All these different things. Why? Because meditation is so powerful. Meditation is so important. And so I don't usually do this, but if we want to take a practical lesson from today's Tanya class, I would say that this is it. Besides, we spoke about self-image, but there's lots of philosophical and ways that it'll enhance the way we. Everything is practical in Tanya, right? The way we go about our lives, the way we become better people, etc. Right? But if we want to take a practical lesson in our service of God, when we daven, when we pray, it shouldn't just be saying words, right? We take a moment. You just said a word, whatever it is, hallelujah, right? Praise God. Hallelujah nafshi, my soul praises God. God counts all the stars in the heaven and calls them all by name. Take a moment, think about what that means. All the stars. Meditate. Use these moments. And meditation doesn't have to mean that you're sitting with your legs crossed. With all due respect to Hollywood, it doesn't need to mean, and to the country of India.
So you can concentrate, and even if the people continue to pray, just
100%.
on something that you
100%. 100%. Don't tell the non-Chabad Hasidim that I just introduced this and said it's so simple. Because people that are not Chabad, that are not Hasidim, this was one of their original conflicts with Hasidim, that they would daven for hours and hours on end. But it's so important. We just explained why it's so important. Yes, so even if you fall behind the minyan, it's important. Okay? All right. One of the questions that we asked at the beginning of, we're running a little late, so I'm just we'll wrap up here. We'll talk about truth very quickly, very briefly, Pam. No, almost there. Almost there. We're in number 5. We're in number 5 because we want to address the question. It should be easy to address this question, but at the beginning of Tanya, we asked the question about Rabbah. Anybody remember Rabbah? Rabbah said, Kegona na Beinoni. For example, I'm a Beinoni. Everybody looked at him and said, really, if you're a Beinoni, what are we? Right? The key here is that Rabbah was deathly afraid of making the mistake of calling himself a tzaddik when he's a Beinoni. They can be very similar, right? And somebody mentioned earlier that maybe they don't even know, right? Because practically they do the same thing. They don't fall, right? And sometimes even not just practically on the outside, but even on the inside, the way their drives are also similar. Because the Beinoni, when he's in a moment of prayer, of Torah study, or whatever it is, right? What did we mention about Rabbah? The one thing we quoted about Rabbah, we didn't bring his whole historical story. The one thing we mentioned about Rabbah was that he was famous for never letting his mouth cease from Torah study. He never got a chance to know whether he's a tzaddik or a Beinoni. What would be the proving test? When he stops Torah study, does his nefesh abamet, his evil inclination, does his animal soul flare up or not? He never got that chance. So, as a real tzaddik, he erred on the side of caution and assumed he was a Beinoni. Because his animal soul was in this sleep-like state. Right? And this, my friends, is the ideal state of the Beinoni. To find a level where he can actually get right. The Beinoni, in terms of the highest level of the Beinoni, the ideal state of the Beinoni is for him to reach a stage where he can actually get his nefesh abamet to be asleep. It will never cease to exist, and he'll be a tzaddik. No, we're still talking about a Beinoni here. But if he can get it at least to sleep, if he can get it at least to not play an active role, still there, the voice is still there, but it's like sleeping, that's the ideal state of the Beinoni. And here's where we get to this complicated thing about truth. The funny thing is that while for a Beinoni this is considered the epitome of what he can do, for a tzaddik this is considered a failure. Why? Because it's a temporary state. Yeah. This state where you're busy studying Torah or you're praying fervently, whatever it is temporary. The moment it's done, because you're a Beinoni, you go right back to it. You've never taken a moment to destroy, to utterly transform your animal soul to a force for godliness. So it's still there. So when it comes to the Beinoni, you're talking about somebody who, at their highest level, is still going to contain an animal soul. That's the highest level. But when you're talking about a tzaddik, this is the lowest level. Right? This is where we get the truth. Why? Because truth is about consistency. Truth is about permanence. Truth is about something that doesn't change. But truth can be, bear with me, I know this is going to sound cryptic, truth can be consistent or unchanging in each level on its level. Right? By each person, their goal is the same. It's the same truth. We're looking to tie in as much, to exercise as much as we can the muscle of the godly soul, and as least as we can of the animal soul. But by the Beinoni, he has no chance of getting rid of his animal soul. So by him, truth is putting the animal soul to sleep. By the tzaddik, he has that ability. So keeping the animal soul asleep is the lowest thing he can do. So it's a different truth. Does that make sense? But it's consistent. Because it's the same goal.
But if the animal soul sleeps for a long time, maybe...
No.
The potential.
No. It's an active effort to destroy the animal soul. He could be sleeping for years, he'll come back.
Yeah.
He was always there. Unfortunately, yes, we know that, huh? In the Chassidus, one of the in Chassidic stories and Darkei, so like Chassidic tradition, one of the nicknames for the animal soul is the Klugenker, the trickster, like the one who, in Yiddish, the trickster, like the one who knows. He's always there. He figures out his way. There's Chassidus talks about the Yetzer Hara, who the evil inclination, who clothes himself in a zaydin zupitza, in a silk rabbinic cloak. And he comes to you and he says, right? Everybody knows this one, right? He comes to you and he says, "You're kidding me? You have to go do this. You're such a great tzaddik. You really have to go do this." He tells you to do something good. This he got you on his side, and then but also do this. Whatever. Lots of tricks of the trade. Listen, he has a godly energy that powers him, so he knows what he's doing. All right.
I have a burning question.
And with this we conclude, before we move on to the burning question, with this we conclude chapter 13, the Beinoni's complex life.